Good evening, everybody, and thank you all so much for joining us this evening to learn more about the Arizona Hunt Guidelines. My name is Logan Christian, and I'm the Region 2 Conservation Advocate for Mountain Lion Foundation. And joining me this evening, we have Gabe Wigtill and Haley Stewart from Humane Society of the United States, as well as Sophia Ressler from Center for Biological Diversity. Tonight's presentation is going to last about 30 minutes, and then we'll follow that up with our Q&A. And our presentation is going to cover what the Arizona Hunt Guidelines are, the status of Arizona's native carnivores, including the status of hunting of these species, and then the recommendations that we suggest submitting to the Arizona Game and Fish Department on behalf of these species. So we'll also provide some information at the end on how you can write an effective comment and where to submit your comment as part of this process. If you have any questions during the presentation, what we're going to do this evening is use the QA box. So you can just click that button at the bottom, type your question in the QA box, and I will be monitoring those and compiling them to answer them all at the end. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we can at the end, and hopefully we'll get all your questions answered so you can submit comments as part of this process. So thanks again for being here, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so what are the Arizona Hunt Guidelines? Many of you are probably somewhat familiar with this process since you're here, but as an overview, every 5 years, the Arizona Game and Fish Department reviews their hunting regulations, and then they recommend these overarching changes to the way that game species are managed. So these changes can be anything like harvest limits, the length and timing of hunting seasons, the methods that are allowed for pursuing and killing animals, and the boundaries of hunting units or management zones. So the department's proposed hunt guidelines are then presented to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. And once the Game and Fish Commission approves, the hunt guidelines are in effect for the next 5 years. So this process is a little bit different than the annual hunt recommendations. Those are just smaller annual adjustments to things like harvest limits, maybe dropping the limit or raising it a little bit. But these hunt guidelines are what those recommendations are based on. So it's this much more overarching process, and it sets all those smaller adjustments that happen on a year-to-year basis. And that's why it's so important to get involved with this process. It's only going to come around once in a while, and it has a really big impact on Arizona's hunted wildlife species. So the timeline for this process is well underway. The original draft has been submitted to the commission for an initial review on the December 10th commission meeting. And now there's this publicly available comment period that goes through January 30th. Once Arizona Game and Fish receives comments, they're going to review those comments and actually post answers to them online sometime in March. And then the department may adjust the guidelines slightly and submit it for final review to the commission for approval at their April meeting. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to some of my colleagues to start talking a little bit more about the status of our native carnivores.
Thanks so much, Logan, and thank you all so much for joining us. As Logan mentioned, my name is Haley Stewart. I am a program manager with the Humane Society of the United States, and I work on native carnivore protection throughout the country. So, while our organizations, we do care about the ethical treatment of all wildlife in Arizona, our work on the state's hunt guidelines are really focused on native carnivores, and specifically they're focused on black bears, mountain lions, and bobcats. And that's because these animals are really vital for their ecosystems as well as for other wildlife, which is why they're often referred to as a keystone species. When you remove or erode that keystone, the rest of the ecosystem is also impacted. And the presence of these animals on the landscape actually increases biological diversity. And native carnivores can even keep their prey healthier, typically targeting deer and other prey that are sick, reducing the spread of disease within a herd. So we really focus on black bears, mountain lions, and bobcats because these animals in particular are hunted using some of the cruelest practices and for nothing more than a trophy or for bragging rights. And so for that reason, we do refer to the hunting of these animals as trophy hunting. While you may hear some hunters insist that there is no trophy hunting in Arizona, the reality is people are primarily killing these animals as trophies, or in the case of bobcats, to sell their soft belly furs on international markets. And while some may claim that they eat the meat of these animals, that's not their primary motivation for hunting them. It really is for their pelts or trophies or bragging rights. And hunting native carnivores is really detrimental to black bears, mountain lions, and bobcats because it not only kills individual animals, but disrupts their entire communities and can even result in increased conflicts with humans, pets, and livestock. For example, bears and mountain lions spend significant amounts of time raising their young, in some cases up to 24 months. And hunting disrupts those family bonds, causing orphaning and destabilizes networks of animals, resulting in more conflicts when young animals are left behind without developing really important life skills like how to hunt their natural prey. And so for these reasons, it's critical to protect these animals and reduce the excessive killing of them. And we believe the hunt guidelines are a really great opportunity for Arizona to adopt some more common sense, scientifically sound, and humane management of the state's native carnivores. But before we get into the changes that we'd like to see in the hunt guidelines and what you can do to help, it's important to better understand how these animals are currently managed throughout the state of Arizona. So we're going to start with mountain lions first. Mountain lions, they are the largest cat in the US, aside from jaguars, who have not actually reestablished a resident population here, but we do see wandering individuals from time to time. And for mountain lions, Arizona is home to approximately 1,200 to 1,700 mature age cats. And when I'm saying mature age, I mean those who are independent, they've left their mothers and are living on their own. And those are the ones who are legally allowed to be hunted. And that's really important to remember when we're talking about hunting quotas and population, we're specifically talking about that mature age population. In Arizona and most other states, hunters are not allowed to kill mountain lion kittens. But if you include a rough guesstimate of mountain lion kittens, the Arizona Game and Fish Department believes the state's total mountain lion population could be around 2,000 to 2,700 cats. And Arizona sets an annual hunting quota of around 350 or so mountain lions. And since 2010, hunters have killed more than 3,000 mountain lions, which averages 280 cats each year. And dozens of additional mountain lions are also killed each year from things like response to livestock depredation, vehicle collisions, poaching, and poisoning. And in addition to that annual quota, there are some other really important hunting regulations that you should be aware of. And they're going to be really relevant to what we're recommending for during the hunt guideline process. And my colleagues are going to talk to you a bit about that. The first is understanding that Arizona Game and Fish sets limits on mountain lion hunting, intending to prevent the overhunting of their population. The agency has established some new limits in recent years, and we really applaud them for that. However, these limits currently don't represent the best available science or go far enough to truly protect mountain lions from overhunting. So for example, while the agency is working to limit hunting to no more than 14% of the mountain lion population, they're using that total population estimate, which includes the guesstimate of kittens who are not even legally hunted. So as a result, lion hunting likely exceeds sustainable levels in Arizona. Additionally, the agency wants to limit adult female mortality, but they're using a threshold of 25% females, which is above the 20% recommended by experts. And the agency also allows hunting of mountain lions from August 20th to the end of May. And this is one of the longest seasons of any state with mountain lion hunting, and it overlaps with peak birthing season, as well as during extremely hot periods of the year when resources like water are really limited to mountain lions and other wildlife. And lastly, the agency has the option to allow the pursuit of mountain lions at any time of year, meaning that hunters can chase but not kill lions. Moving on to black bears. Black bears are really unique in Arizona because they're Arizona's only bear species. Unfortunately, we really don't have a sound population estimate for black bears in Arizona. There has been research that was published more than 10 years ago suggesting that it could be around 2,500 to 3,500 bears. But even so, trophy hunters kill more than 3,000 black bears in Arizona since 2010, with an average of 283 bears killed each year. And so it's a really high number without knowing the population. So as a result, hunting of black bears in Arizona, like mountain lions, likely exceeds what researchers believe to be sustainable, which is about 4 to 10% of the population. And despite not having a reliable population estimate, Arizona Game and Fish doesn't have a total limit on black bear hunting. In Arizona, hunters they're really only limited by 1 bear per calendar year, and the agency limits the number of females who can be killed to not exceed 10% of the female population for each unit. But of course, this kind of limit is really tricky without having a truly reliable population estimate. And lastly, the bear hunting season varies widely throughout Arizona. In 2021, it started as early as August 6th in some areas and ran through the end of December. And then there is also a spring bear hunting season when trophy hunters can kill bears who have recently woken up from hibernation. And my colleague Sophia is going to be sharing in just a bit why Arizona's spring bear hunt is exceptionally cruel and needs to end. And then lastly, for bobcats in Arizona, the population in Arizona is fairly more reliable than for mountain lions or black bears. It's thought to be about 62,000 to 66,000 cats across the state. However, this estimate is also more than 10 years old. And while their population is thought to be much larger than that of mountain lions or black bears, hunters kill far more bobcats in Arizona. So each year, around 1,500 to 2,000 bobcats are killed by hunting and trapping in the state. And the bobcat hunting season lasts from August 1st to the end of March. The trapping season is a bit shorter, that lasts from November 1st to the end of February each year. And like mountain lions and black bears, bobcats can be chased down by packs of dogs, and hunters can use live traps known as cage or box traps to catch bobcats and then kill them at point blank range. And on private lands, trappers are allowed to use other types of traps, including leg hold traps, snares, and instant killing body gripping traps. These traps are extremely cruel and can maim the animal or cause them to suffer a long, excruciating death. And as I mentioned previously, bobcats, they are typically killed for their soft belly fur, which is then used for fur clothing production. So now you have a good overview of kind of the state of mountain lion, black bear, and bobcat hunting in Arizona. And I'm going to hand it back to my colleagues. We're going to talk to you specifically about the hunt guidelines and our recommendations.
All right, thank you, Haley. So to start with mountain lions, these are the 2 main changes that are being proposed in the Arizona hunt guidelines for mountain lions. And we're actually not directly addressing these changes. They're relatively benign and conform with what the agency has mostly already been doing. Most of the recommendations I'll be talking about in a moment are actually focused mostly on the current regulations that are already on the books. But just to go over these briefly, the agency is proposing limiting total female mountain lion mortality to 50%, which means that no more than 50% of the annual hunt can consist of females of any age. This is actually pretty close to what the agency already is doing. And what's really important is actually the adult female mortality sublimits. And so I'm going to talk about our recommendations for those in a moment. The other proposed change is reconfiguring some management zones, mostly consolidating some hunting units to make it easier to assess the population within those units, which is a perfectly fine recommendation, and we're not recommending anything contrary to that. So these are our main recommendations on behalf of mountain lions under the hunt guidelines. And before I jump into these, I just want to note that our organizations believe, and there is plenty of evidence to support the fact that mountain lions do not need to be hunted to maintain their population or even to maintain the populations of their prey species. There's lots of evidence, and we're going to be supporting those and sharing those on our action page as well as in our final comments. But I think the best example of why this is the case comes from California, a state that does not allow sport hunting of mountain lions and only removes mountain lions that are causing problems after non-lethal means have been exhausted. And in California, which also has many more mountain lions than Arizona, the state kills less than half as many mountain lions as Arizona kills with hunting and other depredation removal and sources of mortality each year. And that's despite having not only a bigger population of mountain lions, but about 7 times as many people who could potentially come into conflict with mountain lions. And so this idea that we have to have mountain lion hunting in order to prevent conflict or manage the population sustainably is just simply not supported. But if we are going to have mountain lion hunting, we recommend that it at least be managed by the best available science and the established best practices from other state wildlife agencies. So our first recommendation is to better protect female mountain lions that have dependent kittens. And to make this possible, we first recommend extending that summer season closure into the fall. If we could keep hunting closed until December 1st, it would actually prevent over 90% of kittens from being orphaned by hunters. But even extending just by a month or two would prevent a lot of those instances of kitten orphaning as well. And that's because, as my colleague alluded to earlier, many mountain lions in Arizona, and this is from research that actually comes from Arizona Game and Fish, they actually have their kittens a little bit later in the season to avoid the heat of the summer months. So closing hunting during the summer definitely accommodates some of the birth pulse, but not all of it. So we're recommending extending that summer season closure. Additionally, the adult female harvest limit in Arizona only applies to, or only considers females adults when they've reached the age of 3, even though many females actually are reaching reproductive maturity between the ages of 2 and 3. And that really matters because 2-year-old lions are currently one of the most heavily hunted segments of the population. Just from the 2020 harvest data for mountain lions in Arizona, 1/3 of female mountain lions killed were 2-year-olds. So by not accounting for those reproductively mature 2-year-olds that are being killed, and because it's such a heavily hunted segment of the population, we're not really capturing and protecting these females that are so responsible for propagating the population and keeping it going. Additionally, that best available research calls for a 20% adult female harvest limit rather than a 25% limit. And so we're also recommending using that lower limit. And that's more in line with states like Colorado, New Mexico, and other states that manage female harvest limits as well. So our second main recommendation, we're recommending limiting hunting to 14% of the independent mountain lion population rather than the total mountain lion population. Haley explained kind of the distinction there earlier, but just to clarify, most states estimate both the independent population, which are basically any mountain lion that has left their mother, they're dispersing or they've established themselves and they're adults. And then they also estimate the total population, which includes kittens. And those total populations tend to have a much bigger range because it's very difficult to estimate kitten survival and how many kittens there are in a particular population. And that's why most states end up using that independent population for setting harvest limits. The best available science suggests applying a 14% harvest limit to the independent mountain lion population. And that's what Colorado's doing. That's what other neighboring states who use population-based harvest limits are doing. So if we continue to use this total population, it's erroneously inflating the number of lions that can be harvested each year. And it doesn't make sense to include kittens in the population estimate that we're applying harvest limits to because kittens aren't hunted. It's illegal to hunt kittens in the state of Arizona and in basically every state in the Western United States. Now, one other recommendation related to population and harvest limits that we're suggesting is to also include habitat conditions in our estimates of Arizona's mountain lion population. And the current population model does not account for habitat quality, which we know is declining due to drought and decreasing abundance of prey species like deer. So we're also calling for improving that population model over time by including habitat conditions in it as well. And finally, these last couple recommendations, they're a little bit lower priority, but they're still super important. And we hope that you'll ask for these as well. First, we're recommending ending the pursuit only season. Those pursuit only seasons essentially are to give mountain lion hunters the opportunity to train their hounds so they can chase down mountain lions and tree them, but they just can't kill them. The problem is, first of all, there's a lot of opportunity to train your hounds during the regular hunting season. So this is an unnecessary extra strain on mountain lions to be chasing them around. And these pursuit only seasons also tend to happen during the summer, which is the hottest time of the year, the most stressful time of the year for mountain lions, a time of the year when many of them are having kittens, and to be chasing them around during this time of the year when there's already other opportunities to train your hounds is just cruel and unnecessary. And so we're asking to end that pursuit only season. And finally, we're asking the Game and Fish Department to require that mountain lion hunters take a mountain lion sex identification course. This is also common practice in most states, and it basically allows hunters the opportunity to make sure they're accurately identifying mountain lions in the field, which better informs their decisions about whether or not to take an animal. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sophia, who's going to talk a little bit more about bears.
Thanks, Logan. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Sophia Ressler, and I'm a staff attorney in the Carnivore Conservation Program at the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm going to go over some of the specific asks we are making to Arizona Game and Fish to better protect the state's black bear population. One of the reasons we are focusing on black bears is this population is highly susceptible to climate change. There are a few reasons why. Black bears are dependent on mast crops such as acorns and other nuts, and the availability of these crops will be impacted by our changing climate. Black bears are also cold weather dependent for denning. With warmer temperatures, bears are going to spend more time outside the den, which will put them at greater risk of conflict. Black bears are slow to reproduce, and research shows that killing black bears can significantly jeopardize their population. Because of this, we are asking Arizona Game and Fish for 3 specific things that will help to protect black bears in these hunting guidelines. First, we're asking that human-caused mortality remain between 4 and 10%. We are also asking the department to ban the use of hounds to pursue both black bear and mountain lions in recreational hunts. And finally, we are asking the department to ban the spring bear hunt. You can go to the next slide. As Haley mentioned, the black bear population estimate in Arizona, as in most states, is really just a guess. The department roughly estimates black bear population in each game management unit, or GMU, by applying density estimates based on how suitable the habitat is for black bear. These estimates also use hunter kill data, but with reporting issues and other factors, this is not the most reliable way to determine population. A multitude of wildlife biologists have reported that agency sightings, hunter kill reporting, and agency kills are not dependable ways to determine black bear populations. However, reliable methodologies such as DNA hair snag analysis and capture-recapture do exist. This is why we are asking Arizona Game and Fish to better monitor its black bear population using more reliable methods to determine the actual number of black bears in the state. Once the department has those more reliable population numbers, based on supporting science, all human-caused black bear mortality should make up only 4 to 10% of the total population. Reliance on proper population estimates is especially important to regulate take of female black bears. These bears are sparsely populated over vast areas and reproduce slowly. They also do not have many offspring and tend to spend a more extended time with their offspring compared to other species. Making sure killing of female bears is properly regulated according to the science is incredibly important for the continued conservation of this species. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to talk about hunting with hounds, which is the practice of using dogs to find and hunt wildlife. This is one of the methods currently allowed in Arizona for the pursuit of both mountain lions, black bears, as well as many other animals. Although the current hunt guidelines do have some sparse requirements for this practice, there is not a lot of guidance or rules for hunters who choose to engage in this activity. This is concerning because hound hunting can be incredibly stressful on the animal being pursued, put both the animal being pursued and the dogs at risk, impact non-target species, and result in trespass on private land or public lands where dogs are not allowed. Hunters tout hound hunting as a more selective way to determine sex prior to killing animals, but researchers who have done empirical studies show that it's difficult for hunters to determine either the age or sex of an animal that has been treed by hounds. Furthermore, many hunters contend that this practice goes against fair chase principles, as hunters engaging in hound hunting have an unfair advantage. This is especially true in this day and age with the use of GPS collars and other advanced technology that hunters have access to. Hound hunting is simply not worth it. The reasons I have outlined are just some of the issues that relate to hunting with hounds, and the research on the issues surrounding this unsavory practice is abundant. That is why we are asking Arizona Game and Fish to ban the use of hounds to hunt or pursue native carnivores for recreational purposes. Next slide, please. Thank you. The last major request we have pertaining to bears is for the department to ban the spring black bear hunt. The proposed hunt guidelines do recommend shortening the spring bear season to just 1 month, but we believe the science and lack of management rationale support banning the spring hunting season entirely. Although the agencies do make an effort to avoid mother bears being killed during the spring hunt, the data shows that nursing mothers are killed during this hunt regardless. This inevitably leaves their cubs to suffer and die from starvation, predation, or exposure to the elements. Because black bear cubs depend on their mothers for up to the first 2 years of their lives, this hunt can have dire consequences for cubs. Both hunters and the agency may try to assert that these seasons are actually timed to avoid harming nursing mothers because they are the last to emerge from the den. But research shows there is no distinction in den emergence between different types of black bears, such as those with or without cubs. Thus, specific season setting is not actually a method of preventing cub orphaning. This season also targets bears that have just emerged from hibernation. Black bears during this season are physically stressed due to fasting for months and are simply attempting to properly nourish themselves. They do not need the added stress of harassment by hunters when they're in such a weak physical condition. There is no proper management rationale for this hunt, nor science that purports this hunt is necessary in any way. This cruel and unsportsmanlike hunt is simply a recreational killing opportunity. That is why we are asking Arizona Game and Fish to do away with it entirely. 40 states in the US have black bear populations, but Arizona is only one of 8 that currently allows a spring bear hunt. So just to do a quick recap, the 3 things that we are asking Game and Fish for are that human-caused black bear mortality should be between 4 and 10%, that the use of hounds for recreational hunting of black bears and mountain lions should be banned, and that the spring bear hunt should be outlawed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. My name is Gabe Wigtill, and I'm the Arizona State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. Lastly, for bobcats, we're recommending to the department that they prohibit all trapping on public and private lands. In 1994, Arizona voters approved Prop 201, which was a ballot initiative that banned steel jaw leg hold traps, body gripping traps, poisons, and snares on public lands. The people of Arizona have voiced their opposition against these egregious methods. On public lands, bobcats can still be captured and subsequently killed in box and cage traps. On private lands, all of these methods are allowed, including steel jaw leg hold traps. So we've had a chance to learn a bit about the importance of these native carnivores, about the current hunt guidelines, and about what changes we hope to see. I'm guessing that if you've joined us tonight, you already care about protecting these animals. And now I hope that you feel inspired and informed to take action. If that's the case, great. Let's talk about how you can do that. The department has opened up a public comment period from January 1st through January 30th, during which members of the public like you can submit written recommendations for the guidelines. Once the agency has heard from the public, they might make further updates to the guidelines. So it's very important that you submit comments during this time that call for greater protections for black bears, mountain lions, and bobcats, including some of the recommendations we've mentioned today. If you want to read the entire hunt guidelines to learn more about them, you can find these posted on the department's website. Submitting comments is as easy as sending an email to azhuntguidelines@azgfd.gov. We'd encourage you to submit your comments now while this material is fresh in your mind and so that you don't miss the January 30th deadline. The department will post all of the comments that they receive and their responses by March 18th on their website. And to complete this process, the department will present their final draft to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission in April, and the commission will vote on whether or not to approve them. The commission meeting is another opportunity to voice your comments on these guidelines. The public can attend and comment in person at commission meetings, and at times recently has allowed remote testimony. How can you write effective comments? First, it's important to claim your space. The wildlife in Arizona belong to all who live here. Identify yourself as an Arizona resident if you are one. Talk about your connection to wildlife and how these guidelines will affect you. Do you participate in wildlife watching? Do you travel and spend money throughout the state to participate in outdoor recreation? What are your own personal values regarding wildlife? If you're knowledgeable about other scientific information about these species, share it. Write about the specific changes that you want to see. If you are most concerned about a single species, or if a single issue we spoke about tonight resonated with you, it's okay to just focus on that species or issue. Keep your comments specific to the proposal, these five-year hunt guidelines. This isn't a time to go off topic or write comments about another wildlife issue that concerns you. There are other opportunities to voice those concerns, and being off topic will distract from your comments related to this proposal. Be disciplined. Use your own words. It's important to write from your own authentic voice. Write in a way that feels comfortable for you. A lot of the information that we've shared tonight is technical. You can write about these issues in a way that feels comfortable for you. If you use controversial terms like trophy hunting, be sure to define exactly what you mean when you say that. What are you talking about? As always, be polite, respectful, and speak the truth. If you oppose all hunting of these species, it's still important that you include suggested management changes. Realistically, the department prioritizes hunting as a recreational activity. Your goal should be to convince the department to heed the best available science and to do what is best for the long-term persistence of Arizona's wildlife populations. Encourage others to comment. And remember, the comment process is not a vote. The department and the commission will not make their decisions based on which type of comments are received the most. They are looking for comments of substance that will inform their decision-making process. That's all we have planned for our presentation tonight. See, there's probably come some Q&As in the chat box tonight, and I will defer to Logan to handle some of those. So thank you all very much for joining us.
All right, thanks again, everybody. I've been monitoring the Q&A, and those we're definitely going to be able to answer most of the questions that have popped up so far. If you have a question while we're going, you can continue to submit them there. I might just have my colleagues keep an eye on those as we're going through these first questions. So one quick question, this was only asked once, but I think it's an important one to answer up front. Can we get a copy of the slides? All that other organizations answer as well. I will definitely submit the slides to people who registered through our link with Mountain Lion Foundation, and I'll put our slides on our Arizona State Action page on our website. But Haley and Sophia and Gabe, do you want to shake yes or yes if you can share the slides?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think this webinar is being recorded, so we could even post recordings of it on our Facebook pages. So, so our organization Facebook pages. So if you follow us on Facebook, you can look for it there as well, but I'm sure we'll send a link to it in a follow-up email.
Great. Yep. So we'll send those, and feel free to ask more questions after you review those slides or the webinar recording. We had quite a few questions about our references, things like where we're getting our numbers, and about the population estimates, what surveys or research are you referring to with our current population numbers. So others might have comments on this as well. One of the specific things we got a question about was the, let's see here, was the question about the 20% female harvest limits that's based on the best available science. That recommendation comes from a paper called the Garnet Range Mountain Lion Study, Characteristics of a Hunted Population in West Central Montana, very commonly cited paper in mountain lion research, and that's Robinson and DeSimone 2011, in case you're curious. We had some questions in general about population numbers and other numbers we cited here, and I will say, we publicly post our comments that we submit to the wildlife agencies. We're happy to share those with anybody who's curious, and those will contain all of the references that I talked about regarding mountain lions. So feel free to email me. We're going to have our emails here if you want to reach out to us directly. I'll also be posting our mountain lion comments on our website on our Arizona State Action page. So does anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question. So thank you for it. I would say with all the population estimates, those are estimates that we get from Arizona Game and Fish. It's estimates that they personally rely on. So they're not ones that, we're making up, or they're anecdotal estimates. Those are the ones that, we do really rely on state wildlife agencies to provide us with their most up-to-date information. And I know there was a question in there about the black bear harvest numbers. And yeah, so I'm not sure if that person wants to clarify their question. We definitely know how many animals are being harvested each year because the agency posts those numbers on their website. The question is just the population estimates. A lot of them are just they're not really reliable. They're old estimates, 10 plus years old. Or like with mountain lion kittens, it's just guesstimates. And so setting hunting quotas based off rough guesstimates is not scientifically sound these days when we have, so many really reliable methods that can help us establish how many animals are on the landscape. And we should be using just the most up-to-date science in order to set population estimates and base reliable and sustainable hunting quotas off of those.
Great, thank you, Haley. So let's see, we have a few more questions related to specific species. So I'll start with one with mountain lions, and I saw a couple related to just hound hunting and bears. So somebody asked about the California example that I gave and regarding whether there's conflict in California. And there's really good research from California Department of Fish and Wildlife that shows that their non-lethal methods, specifically their 3-step program for preventing conflict that involves non-lethal methods before killing mountain lions, is working very well to prevent conflict compared to other states that have hunting. And so that paper is Dellinger et al. 2021, Temporal Trends and Drivers of Mountain Lion Depredation in California. Let's see, there was a question with regard to banning hunting with hounds. This is actually an older traditional practice. Hounds are used by state and federal agencies. Should state and federal agencies also halt using hounds?
So I'll take that one, Logan. We are certainly not asking for state and federal agencies to halt using hounds, and that's actually not what these Arizona hunting guidelines are about. The ask to the Arizona Game and Fish Department is that recreational use of hounds to hunt native carnivores is stopped. I'm very aware that use of hounds is also something that people use for bird hunting and lots of other species. So we are solely focusing on native carnivores for recreational use in this instance. And by no means are we trying to stop the use of trained hounds for public risk issues, or they are often sometimes used for nuisance wildlife removal as well, if they're damaging property or affecting public safety. So we are not asking for a ban on that at this point.
Great. So we had a few questions related to kind of how things were defined. So terms like trophy hunting versus harvest. Some people have concerns about harvest and how that can be sort of a euphemism and not really capturing that it's killing these animals. Some people sort of suggest that, trophy hunting isn't what hunters are doing. And so I'll just kind of speak on behalf of how I view these issues with trophy hunting. It does kind of come down to how you define these terms, but with mountain lion hunting, as well as hunting of most carnivore species, there's pretty good reason to believe that at least one of the motivations, if not the primary motivation, is obtaining a trophy animal. The reason I say that is because it can cost thousands of dollars to pay for a guide to go mountain lion hunting, if not tens of thousands of dollars and a ton of time to train your own hounds. That's a lot of time and investment if sustenance were the primary motivation. And that's not to say that hunters don't, hunt for many different motivations, whether it's sport, tradition, sustenance. But we use the term trophy hunting with regard to mountain lions because we believe that one of the primary motivation is to obtain a trophy animal. And then related to that point, with harvest limits, I mostly refer to harvest limits because that's how the agency does it. I agree that it's a bit of a euphemism, but we want to make sure that when we're referencing things in our comments, that you're using some of their language so they know you're referring to specific regulations that are theirs. So I would say still use those terms. And with trophy hunting, if you're going to use that term in your comment, maybe just define what you mean by it, because there is some controversy over whether or not this kind of hunting is trophy hunting. Does anyone want to add to those points?
Yeah, I think that's about right. That's how the HSUS sees it as well. I really hate the term harvest. These are not ears of corn. These are live animals with families and a right to their own lives. And so trying to water down what is actually occurring on the landscape, I think, is a huge disservice to these animals. But regardless, when you are trying to communicate with an agency, it is often easier to use their terms so that you can have a conversation where you both understand what each other are talking about. So if you don't feel comfortable saying harvest, you could just say hunting. If you're confused on the trophy hunting aspects of it, you could just say recreational hunting. I agree that there are many motivations for people going out to hunt these animals. And one of the primary motivations, if not the primary motivation, is for bragging rights or a trophy, or for bobcats, it is for that soft belly fur, for the fur market. However, I think that there are a lot of people out there who would say, well, we eat mountain lion meat. I have not really heard that at all for bobcats, but black bears, mountain lions, yeah, there are a lot of hunters out there that say they do eat the meat. But at the end of the day, that's not their primary drive for hunting these animals. And regardless of that, these are, as I mentioned, incredibly valuable animals for the ecosystem. They are top carnivores, and they are essential to ensuring that our local ecosystems are biologically diverse and healthy. And so, our focus really is on these species, not just because they are trophy hunted, but because the killing of them is so detrimental to our entire ecosystem that these animals live within.
So I did see a couple other comments. In fact, one earlier that I might have missed about seeing some different harvest data from different sources. I know Haley mentioned about 280 per year of mountain lions have been killed over the last 10 years. I've referenced 320 per year over the last 5 years. The one I referenced, 320, that includes for depredation harvest. So when people kill mountain lions because they've depredated on livestock. So that all that harvest data is publicly available. It's online if you go to the agency's website. So you're welcome to check those numbers as well, or follow up with us if you have further clarification about how we've defined those numbers. Let's see here. I know I saw a question about should we call for an end to hunting? So I would say that's perfectly acceptable to ask for an end to hunting of these species. There's good research to support that as well. But if you're going to do that, we would definitely recommend still including suggestions for changing management of if hunting is going to continue, because it probably will. And along with that, I saw a question about whether the commission is even going to have any willingness to sort of change things in the regulations. Part of this process is getting these points out there, getting other people aware of the current state of these species, and making sure that the commission is aware of the science that we're referencing here, the best practices from other states. So, you know, we hope that they will heed the science and take some of these changes. And, you know, this is where change starts, is with lots of people sort of expressing that, hey, there's a better way to do things. So, you know, we can't know the outcome of this process until we get to the other side. The good news is there are other time periods throughout the hunt guideline or after the hunt guidelines process where some of these can continue to be explored. And the agency's actually expressed looking into some of the recommendations that we've made in phone calls and other conversations with them. So we absolutely recommend, you know, put those recommendations out there, continue to show that there's people thinking about these species from a non-consumptive lens, and you know, submit these recommendations as part of this process. I'm hoping I'm not missing anything. I tried to kind of lump questions here, but I'll take a moment, and if I did miss your question, feel free to drop it in now and we'll see if we can get to it. Yes, you can get a copy of the presentation. We'll be posting those to people who registered through our links as well as on our websites.
I think there was a question about whether or not if there's any indication that the commission is going to have, has any willingness to propose new regulations, and would any changes in the hunting regulations have to be approved by the governor and GRRC. So I think what's important to understand here is these hunt guidelines, they're not regulations. These hunt guidelines they're sort of like an overarching management plan for hunting. They're just guidelines that the annual hunting regulations are based on. So these guidelines, they last for 5 years, and they kind of direct the agency to say, this is how we're going to outline hunting over the next 5 years. And then every year they will set new regulations that abide by those guidelines. And so we won't see new regulations pop up. Logan or Gabe, I'm not sure if you remember what the timeline is for regulation setting. And in fact, they refer to them as the hunting recommendations. So it's a little bit confusing in terms of terms. Different agencies use very different terms for the same things. But so this isn't a regulation setting process. These are overarching guidelines. And I think there are some good changes that we're seeing. I think the agency is recognizing that they do need to take more steps to protect female mountain lions and black bears. That's fantastic. They're also better defining what a legal bear is. Previously, the way it was defined was a little bit vague in terms of cubs. And so now they're making it explicit that hunters are not allowed to kill cubs with or without a mother present, because oftentimes a black bear mother will leave her cubs in a tree and can go for miles in search of food. And so it's oftentimes that a cub will be left alone. So we wanted to make sure that those cubs are protected in those instances. And so these hunting guidelines better define legal bears and explicitly say that a cub cannot be killed.
Okay, I think we've answered most everything. I'm seeing a couple more that just popped up. Does the Arizona legislature have any role? It can, if they decide to. Usually they let the commission and an agency sort of do their thing until, you know, they want to step in on a specific issue. So right now the Arizona legislature is not involved, but it doesn't mean they couldn't be in the future. Let's see.
There was a good question about the black bear population growing, and with no sustained harvest of black bears in the state, how can residents be sure that the population will not expand to the point where there are bears moving into urban areas causing more issues than ever before? That's a really great question. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And I think it really goes to mountain lions as well. You know, for Arizona and in most other states, there really is no science showing that populations of these animals are growing. So I think what we need to do is make sure that all of our facts and statements are really grounded in the best available science. So if an agency, you know, says this is how many mountain lions we have, this is how many black bears we have, you know, we need to kind of do our best to trust the numbers that they're putting out there, even if we have some pushback and would like to see changes. But at this point, you know, we're not seeing a growth in populations of these animals. In fact, in Arizona, the most up-to-date mountain lion population estimates are decline. And so that's really important to know that it's possible, in fact, that their populations are declining. But one of the most critical components that we need to understand about native carnivore management is that they don't need hunting, recreational hunting, in order to sustain their populations. And so what I mean by that is when you think about deer, you know, deer are really dependent on native carnivores to keep their populations limited to a sustainable number. And this gets into a bunch of really wonky science when you're talking about the capacity of a landscape and how many animals can be supported on that landscape. And so for deer and elk and other animals, other prey species for native carnivores, they depend on native carnivores to keep their populations in check. But native carnivores, they exist at the top of the food chain, and they always have. They've never depended on humans to regulate their populations. Instead, they really depend on that bottom-up population from their prey. They depend on the number of prey on the landscape. So when deer and elk populations decline, so too do native carnivore populations. That's really important to remember, that this argument of we need to hunt them to keep their numbers in check, that's just a myth. That's a false argument. It's not scientifically sound. We used to think that's how it worked. But, you know, the last decade or so, we've really seen that that's just not how native carnivores work. What we need to do is protect them from trophy hunting to keep their populations stable. They depend on really social communities and territoriality. And when we disrupt that with trophy hunting, that actually results in more conflicts. Without trophy hunting, we've seen this in other states, you actually get fewer conflicts. There are often talking points about how there's more conflicts in California than in other states. That's not the case. That's very false. The fact is, if you look at the number of mountain lions on the landscape in California, the number of people, the opportunities for conflicts, they're actually incredibly low. California actually, by mountain lion population numbers, has fewer conflicts with mountain lions per capita than Arizona does. But, you know, hunters and agency staff often use these false arguments to really, you know, to promote their argument that we need these practices, we need hunting of these animals. That's false, that's wrong. We need to be protecting these animals, not trophy hunting them.
I'll also just really quickly add, Haley, thank you for all of that amazing information. But there is a lot of there's a lot of people that talk about humans interacting more regularly with carnivores. And if you consider the amount of urban sprawl and the amount that the human population has grown just in the past few decades, a lot of that, a lot of those additional sightings and are, the fact that humans are seeing more carnivores is actually because of our land management. And that is why we continuously talk about non-lethal deterrence measures and how those can help with things like keeping bears out of garbage and the management issues that we consider sometimes when we're talking about these native carnivores.
All right. In the interest of time, we're going to wrap up. One quick kind of clarification question that I saw and want to answer is, are the hunt guidelines set in stone for 5 years, or will the guidelines be allowed to change if there is need to protect wildlife due to various considerations? What we've heard from the agency is that although this really is the main time when all the regulations are set for the next 5 years, there are some opportunities to change things. It's much more difficult during the management cycle of the hunt guidelines to make those adjustments. But if the department sees indication that there really is something that needs to change, or there's new information presented, they can make some of those adjustments. So it is mostly set in stone, but not entirely. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. This really is kind of the most important time to get involved. So I just want to thank everybody again so much for being here and taking an interest in these species and the Arizona hunt guidelines. Again, I think this is a great opportunity for people to have their voices be heard and sort of talk about issues that maybe the Commission and Arizona Game and Fish Department don't always consider. And so we hope that you've enjoyed today's call, and please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have more questions or want clarification on anything. All right, thank you all so much, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening.